It was in 1871, a Prussian field marshal by the name of Helmuth von Moltke the Elder, right? He wrote an essay on military strategy, and he said this. He said, "No plan of operations extends with any certainty beyond first contact with the primary enemy forces." And you're like, cool, what does that mean? Well, that saying, or that essay, or that little bit from the essay, has been revised and been used for years, ever since he wrote that essay on military strategy, and it's been kind of condensed into the more popular version of no plan survives first contact with the enemy. That's kind of how people have reduced that. And it's very true. It's one thing to have a plan, right? And it's another thing whenever you try to execute that plan. As my daughter Caitlin reminded me when we were thinking about this together, she's like, it's like saying easier said than done. And she's right. It's exactly right. And you can make a plan, but then all of a sudden something happens, right? Real life happens. A plan it never survives first contact with real life. It's very difficult for it too. So a plan tends to fall apart when it comes in contact with real life, and that's what Solomon is going to be teaching us about in Proverbs chapter 3. If you turn over there, we're going to look at the first section, as he typically does in verses 1 to 8 of chapter 3. Solomon starts off with an encouragement. He always starts off with an encouragement to hear wisdom, to retain wisdom, to hold on to wisdom, to not forget her. And he says in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 to 8, he says, "My son, forget not my law, and let thine heart keep my commandments. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck and write them upon the tables of thine heart. So shalt thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones." So, what does that say? What does it say? Verses 1 to 2 really says, don't forget my law and keep it in your heart. And the result, he says, it will add life. It will add long life and peace. Verses 3 to 4 really kind of elaborate and escalate verses 1 and 2 when it says, do not forsake mercy and truth and bind it around your neck, write it on your heart. He says, keep it in your heart here. He says, write it in your heart. And the result here, he says, is you'll find good favor with both God and man. And then verses 5 and 6, right here, it's an escalation again, but verses 1 to 4 kind of escalate and overflow into verses 5 and 6. Do you see kind of a progression? A progression here which says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him. And the result is he will direct your paths. And then finally, he kind of sums it all up in verses 7 and 8 when he says, don't be wise in your own eyes. That's where he's leading you. Fear the Lord, depart from evil. And the result is it will give you good health. That's what he says. So you see kind of the pattern. You know, he kind of gives you his statement and then the result, another statement, the result, but he escalates it. He progresses all the way through that. So let me just explain. He's telling you here, being wise in your own eyes, that's the opposite of the fear of the Lord. It's the very opposite of the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is when his revealed word, as we studied before, when we looked at chapter 1, we understood that the fear of the Lord, that statement, is kind of the theological key to the entire book of Proverbs. And we gave you a definition of the fear of the Lord then. The fear of the Lord is when his revealed word mingles fear and love in us, and it humbles us to obey his every word. But we see another word added to our definition in this chapter. So we want to give you a little revised definition, because he adds this word, this most important word, which is trust. To trust in the Lord with all of your heart. So here's a revised definition of the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is when his revealed word mingles fear and love in us and humbles us so that we trust him and desire to obey his every word. You see, our response is not to lean on our own understanding or to be wise in our own eyes. We will not forget or forsake his words, but we will take them with us. We will guard them in our hearts. We will write them in our hearts, which means we trust him with all of our heart. Do you see the progression? He's saying, I want you to keep them in your heart. I want you to write them in your heart. And I want you to trust him with all of your heart. Just 3 times, heart, heart, heart. There's something he really wants you to do there. All of that is to say, the key to that is don't be wise in your own eyes, right? That's why you should keep his words in your heart. Don't be wise in your own eyes. That's why you should write his words in your own heart, right? Don't be wise in your own eyes. That's why you should trust him with all of your heart. But instead, fear the Lord, depart from evil, and then you'll have these results. So what are the big results that he gives us? The big results that he gives us in these verses are really great. He says the result is it will give you, first of all, long life and peace. It will literally add years to your life. For you to keep and write and trust with all of your heart, to fear him, to not be wise in your own eyes, but to fear him and hold his words and his wisdom in your heart so that he's the one that directs your paths instead of you. He says it will add to you, first of all, long life and peace. It will literally add years to your life. Those who refuse will die sooner than they should. This passage proves that, that old saying, hey, when it's your time, it's your time. You ever heard someone say that? Yeah, that's not true. That is not true. When it's your time, it's your time. It's not true. It is possible to die too soon, and it's also possible to live longer than you would have. The difference between the two is often, not always, but is often the difference between wisdom and foolishness, is the difference between the two. But it also adds peace. I like how it adds long life and peace. That's really good, because long life without peace is a curse, not a blessing. Result number 2 is that it also gives you good favor and good understanding with God and man. This means that you will actually, the words there mean you will actually become attractive. You will actually become attractive and be held in good esteem by both God and man. Result number 3 is the result of guidance. Not only will it give you long life and peace and give you good favor, but it also gives you guidance in our paths, meaning that he will, the wording of that phrase, that he will direct your paths, it literally means that he will kind of clear out a path. He will clear it out to make the path plain before you so that you'll know which way to go. It's kind of like in Proverbs 15:19 when he says that the way of the slothful man is like a hedge of thorns, right? But the way of the righteous is made plain. And that's what he does. He takes that path that for many people is like a hedge of thorns and it's all grown over, and he clears out a path. He makes it smooth and makes it plain, but he does that for the purpose of letting you know which path to choose. And so that's what the result will be when you're not wise in your own eyes, but you trust him instead, is he will make your path plain before you. Result number 4 is good health. It says health to our navel and marrow to our bones. When it says that it gives you good health right here in your navel and the marrow in your bones, or marrow in your bones, however you pronounce that, the idea of these words is that it will heal you Okay, and it will heal you physically, psychologically, and spiritually. It's an all-encompassing type of healing. He mentions the navel right here because this is one of those words that is kind of used in place of the whole body, the navel. And he uses this word because that's where the baby receives nourishment from the mother in order for the body to grow, is right in the navel. And so he's using that as a word in order to represent or be symbolic of the whole body. But he also talks about the marrow to your bones because that's what makes our bones stronger. That's what makes us really strong. So sin brings sickness of every kind, physically, psychologically, spiritually. It brings sickness. And foolishness brings frailty to our lives. Like whenever a bone is without marrow, it makes the bone frail. And so does foolishness to your life. Sin makes us sick. Foolishness makes us frail. But fearing the Lord so as to depart from evil, it brings health and healing and strength to our lives in every sense. Now, these are some pretty wonderful encouragements to follow after wisdom. Literally, long life and peace, good favor with God and man, guidance for how you should direct your life, and it brings health to your whole body physically, psychologically, spiritually. It brings health and strength to your life. I mean, he's really given us, in fact, it's one could say it's everything that you could possibly want. Solomon really emphasizes the encouragements and the promises here, and it makes you wonder, why are you doing that? You know, whenever someone's telling you, hey, listen what I can offer you, you're wondering, okay, maybe that's just me. I'm skeptical. I'm like, why are you offering me all these benefits? And he's really doing this for a specific reason. In chapter 1, if you remember, he really encouraged us to listen to wisdom, right? He's like, you need to listen to your parents, right? Really listen to them. And don't listen to that bad crowd. Don't run with that bad crowd, you know. And when Lady Wisdom comes up and she's like, calls out, and will you listen to me? I really encourage you to listen to wisdom. In chapter 2, he really shows you the protection of wisdom. But in chapter 3, Solomon here, he's doing something more. As you can see, there's a bit of an escalation with all of these proverbs. He's asked us to hear wisdom. He's asked us to, when we do, it protects us when we go. But now Solomon is kind of leading us outdoors, if you will. He's leading us into some real life situations. When you wake up and you are met with real life, that is when you must retain and remember God's words and his wisdom the most. That is why he tells us in these first 8 verses, that's why he tells us you need to keep them and guard them in your heart. That's why he tells them you need to wear them around your neck and take them with you. That's why he says you want to write them or literally engrave them on your heart and trust in the Lord with all of your heart, because you're getting ready to walk outdoors into real life, and that's when the plan falls apart. As soon as you come in contact with real life, because you can think, man, this is so true. It's good wisdom. I'm on board with this, and wisdom is going to protect me. And you can think all of that in theory is really good, but as soon as you leave the house, that's when it's really difficult to remember the words of his wisdom. Let me ask you, when do you think it might be the easiest to forget about God's words and to trust in your own wisdom? In what area of life do you think that it might be the easiest to forget his words and his wisdom and to trust in your own wisdom? And he gives us some specific instructions in verses 9 through 12. And in these verses here, he suggests 2 areas. First of all, money, and second of all, hard lessons. Money and hard lessons. Let's look at these verses 9 to 12. He says, honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. And so shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. You can see the pattern there again. He makes a statement, then offers the benefit or the result. Verse 11, my son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as the Father, the Son, in whom he delighteth. Now, he's not just saying these randomly, as if he's just giving you a bit of advice out of nowhere. He's telling you, he's like, you need to hold on to his words, because when you enter into these real life scenarios, that's when you're going to be so tempted to forget. That's when you're going to be so tempted to be wise in your own eyes and not trust the Lord. What's the number one area you're going to do that? With your money. With your money. Because that's where the rubber meets the road for most people. It's all fun and games, and we can talk about worshiping the Lord all we want, but then if people start talking about money, people are like, wait a second. And that's when people tend to back up. Verses 9 to 10, if you take a look at that, he promises that if we will trust him and honor him with our money, he says, then our barn will be filled and our wine presses will burst out with new wine. Now, Solomon almost kind of throws that out like a challenge, right? He throws that out kind of like a challenge. He says, okay, so you say that you really trust the Lord with all of your heart. You trust him and you trust his wisdom. He says, okay, here's a real life situation then. Here is his command and here is his promise. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to trust him then? Or are you going to revert back to being wise in your own eyes? Will you lean on your own understanding, or will you trust him with all of your heart? Will you forsake his words and be wise in your own eyes, or will you keep and trust his words in your heart? It reminds us of the same promise that's given to us in Malachi chapter 3, verses 10 through 11. Malachi chapter 3, verses 10 through 11, the Lord throws out the same challenge. He says, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house. He says, and prove me. He says, I'm just asking you to test me on this one, right? Just see if I won't, the Lord of hosts says, see if I won't open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it. He says, and not only that, but look what he says in verses 11. He says, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, that he destroy not the fruits of the ground. There's your barns. That's what you keep in your barn. Neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time of the field. There's your wine for your wine press. The same promise is given. He says, if you will just honor me with the first fruits, if you'll bring your tithes into the storehouse, he says, then this is the promise. Here's the first life scenario that we have to kind of test ourselves. We say that we trust him with all of our heart, but what happens when we run into real life? What happens when his wisdom invades our everyday life? And Solomon says, okay, here's one of the scenarios where it's easiest to trust in your own wisdom with regards to your money. But let's take a look at the second area in verses 11 and 12. He says, my son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father in whom he delighteth. Solomon brings up these moments of hard lessons, but I want you to see the connection between these two, right? Now, all of this is connected. These are not just random sayings that he's given to you. These things are connected, because when someone comes along and they promise you health and wealth, I think you deserve the right to be skeptical. Whenever someone comes along and offers you these things, you should be skeptical, and you should be skeptical for good reason. Because, to be honest, that doesn't sound like real life, does it? It sounds a bit good to be true. And that is the reason why Solomon follows God's promise, right? For health and wealth. That's why he follows his promise for health and wealth with another moment where we tend to trust in our own wisdom instead of his. That's in the area of hard life lessons. When hard life lessons come along, that's when we tend to run for the hills. That's when we tend to revert to our own wisdom. That's when all of the words of our trusting him with all of our heart seem to fly out the window. See, God's promises regarding health, direction, success, wealth, they're all true, and they can all be trusted. They're all absolutely true. Every promise he's given you here is absolutely true, and they can be trusted. The problem with those promises is not with God. The problem with those promises is that we are the ones who cannot be trusted. You see, sometimes we use God for the health and the wealth. Sometimes we worship the health and the wealth instead of God. Sometimes we love the gift and not the giver. Sometimes we even go as far as to tempt God, like the Israelites did in the wilderness, as if to say, listen, if you're really here, then show me the goods. Where are you at? That's what the Israelites said. They were hungry and they're like, let's see if you are here or not. You promised to provide, so where's it at? And we tempt God. And it's in these moments that God, because he's a good father, because he loves us, he will chasten us and he will provide us with a hard life lesson in these moments. He will go as far as removing the blessing of abundance, and in its place, he will provide you with the blessing of correction. He will provide you with the blessing of correction because he loves us and he wants us to worship him, not his gifts. If we are wise, we will thank God for his gifts, but we will also thank him for their absence. When we see that the health and wealth are absent, we also thank him in those times, because it's in those moments that we actually draw closer to the Lord than we ever would have if everything was going smooth. You see, God does not want us to carelessly slip into idolatry in our lives. So he disciplines us like a good father would. He teaches us. He gives us hard life lessons because those are the things that draw us closer to him. Now, here is really the point. The point is, and as he gives you these scenarios of either your money or hard life lessons, his point is really this. He says, when these times happen, when the time of chastisement happens, when the hard life lessons come, will you trust in the Lord with all of your own heart? When the time of your money comes, when the time of those hard life lessons come, will you trust in the Lord with all of your heart, or will you lean on your own understanding? Will you forget his words? Will you forsake his truth? Or will you trust him? So here are some very wise instructions, and these wise instructions are here in order to keep us close to our Heavenly Father. Two things that he says to us. Number one, honor him with your money. And number two, be thankful for his correction. Honor him with your money and be thankful for his correction. You see, your wisdom, the world's wisdom, says keep the money. It says keep the money and do everything that you can to avoid hard times and especially hard lessons. This is the lesson that Solomon is trying to teach us. He's saying to us, when you wake up tomorrow and you are faced with real life, it's in these times most of all, son, that you need to hold on to his words, that you need to keep them and guard over them, write them on your heart, hang them around your neck so that you don't go anywhere without them. It's in these moments that you have to trust him with all of your heart and don't lean on your own understanding. Let him direct your paths. Don't be wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord and depart from evil. Do you see how that's connected? He's saying it's in these moments that you need those encouragements the most to hold on to his words, because it's in these moments that we are the most prone to forget his words and to entrust in our own wisdom instead. Now, if you can do this, if you can manage to hold on right? When life gets real and it gets real hard, if you can manage to hold on, do you know what will happen to you? Again, I'm just basing this upon God's word, but do you know what will happen to you? Do you know what you will be? If you can press through, in those most crucial moments and hold on to his words and allow him to direct your paths, do you know what you will be? In a word, you will be happy. That's what will happen to you. What will happen to you is you will become happy. In these next words where Lady Wisdom shows up again, he gives us some valuable inside information on Lady Wisdom. Listen to what he says in verses 13 to 20. He says, happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding, for the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof of fine gold. She's more precious than rubies, and all things that can't be desired cannot be compared to her. And listen to what she has. Listen to what wisdom has. Do you see this? Very similar to all the promises and benefits that he just told us about by holding on to his word. He says, length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand is riches and honor, and her ways are the ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. Remember, that's the promise, long life and peace. She is a tree of life that lay hold upon her, and happy is every one that retaineth her. The Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth, and by understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down dew. Now what does this say? What does this passage tell us? First of all, what it teaches us is happy is the man who finds wisdom and understanding. Also, it says she's more valuable than gold, silver, or anything that you can possibly desire. Wisdom is more valuable. It says the length of days is in her right hand. Riches and honor are in her left hand. And her ways are pleasantness and peace. It says that she's a tree of life. And happy is everyone that's able to hold on to her. Everyone who retains her, it says. Everyone who's able to hold on to her, happy is that man. The entire natural order, it says, is governed by wisdom. Lady Wisdom is offering everything that we want out of life. Everything that Solomon said before. And do you see how he equates God's words with God's wisdom? Keeping his words and finding wisdom, they yield the exact same rewards. Health, long days, riches, favor, and peace. Now, here's the question. Are you going to seek, because everybody seeks for these things. Everybody wants these things. Are you going to seek for these things in your own wisdom? Or will you seek for these things through God's wisdom? Now, that's kind of a trick question, because the real lesson here is that we don't seek for these things at all. We don't seek for these things at all. What we seek is the wisdom that comes through the fear of the Lord. It's the wisdom that comes through an intimate relationship with the Lord, through his fear. And all of these things that he talks about here, they're just the icing on the cake. They're the natural consequence of you having a close, intimate relationship with the Lord. Do you remember the exact example that we can see that supports this is what happened between the Lord and Solomon? When Solomon, who wrote this, when God first encountered him and he says, I'll give you anything you want. And what did Solomon want? Did he seek after the riches and the success and the long life? No. He says, I want wisdom. That's what I want. I want you, essentially, is what he's saying. I want your wisdom. I want you to teach me. Solomon, as he stood there in the fear of the Lord, said, I want wisdom. And so what did God do? God granted him exactly what he asked for, but he also threw in the riches and the success and the long life as icing on the cake. It was the natural consequence that was added to his life because of the wisdom that he has. And this is exactly the same way that our Lord explained it in that passage that we all know so well in Matthew 6:31-33, whenever he says, take no thought for your life. Take no thought saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? He says, because this is what the world seeks after. This is what the Gentiles seek after. Your heavenly Father knows that you have need of all these things. He says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And then all these things will be added unto you. That's the natural consequence of you having an intimate relationship with the Lord. We want to seek that wisdom that comes from being close to him. As a natural consequence, these things will come. So if you seek after the riches and the long life and the success, you will get none of it, at least not for very long, and certainly not without regret. But if you seek after a close, intimate relationship with him, and through the wisdom that comes through that, well, then you get the other stuff thrown in. A person who masters God's wisdom is a happy person. That's the result, is a happy person. But Solomon has one more encouragement and one more instruction for us in this passage. He gives us, just like he did in the first part, he kind of starts kind of a second section. It's not separated, but it's kind of a second section where he gives us another encouragement to hold on to wisdom, but he teaches us something a little different. He repeats his encouragement to hold on to his words again and to guard wisdom. He says that if we will do that, in these verses that we're going to look at, he says if we will do that, then we will obtain or will retain to ourselves another most precious commodity. Do you know what that is? It is security. Security is what he says is the result. Look at these verses 21-26. He says, my son, let not them depart from thine eyes. Keep sound wisdom and discretion. So shall they be life unto thy soul and grace to thy neck. And look what he says here, verse 23. Then you shall walk in the way safely, and thy foot shall not stumble. When you lie down, thou shalt not be afraid. Yea, thou shalt lie down, and thy sleep will be sweet. And be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked when it cometh. For the Lord is thy confidence, and thy foot, he will keep thy foot from being taken. So what does this passage say? Well, he tells you, like he does every time, keep his words, hold on to them, right? Because they're going to be grace to your neck. Hold on to them, wrap them around your neck again. And what is the result? He gives us the results here. He says, 1, you walk safely and not stumble. Number 2, he says, you will not have to be afraid. Number 3, he says, you'll be able to sleep with sweet sleep. You'll be able to sleep peacefully. And you'll not be afraid of sudden tragedies coming around the corner. The Lord will be your confidence, and it says he will keep you from being tripped up or taken down. What he's talking about there is he's saying the Lord is what will be your security in this life. The promise here is that if you hold on to wisdom, that wisdom, she will bring you security. Because see, riches and honor, all of those things, and success, they don't mean a whole lot if someone can just take them from you. That's the trouble that rich people always have. You know, people want to get a lot of money, but that's when the trouble really starts. Because once you get all the money, then you have to hold on to it, because someone's always going to want to take it from you. You can see that even in grade school from the very beginning. When someone else sees that you're really happy, what do they want to do? They want to put an end to it. They have to put an end to it, because if they're not happy, then you can't be happy. That's the struggle throughout all of life. You can finally get what you want, but that's when your trouble really starts, because now you have to hold on to it. And that's why he follows up with this great promise that not only will I provide and make you happy, he says, but I will be your security. I will help keep it for you so that you don't have to be afraid, and you can just sleep at night. Sweet sleep at night. Now, why do you suppose that he gives us this great promise of security? Again, he lays it on thick and says, don't worry, I'm going to be your security. Well, that's because who is it that always wants to take our happiness from us? It's always other people. See, Solomon, he brings up some more specific instructions here, because there's another moment when we encounter real life where it's so easy to forget and to trust in our own wisdom. Do you know where that area is? What that moment is when it's so easy to not trust God, but to trust yourself. It's when you come in contact with your neighbors. It's when you come in contact with other people. It's pretty easy to have a good day. You just don't leave the house. That's the secret to having a good day. But even then, someone's bound to call. Your neighbor, who is your neighbor? Well, we've learned from the Lord that your neighbor is anyone who is next to you. Anyone who is next to you is your neighbor. And I think that that's such a good word, neighbor. Because sometimes we get so focused on the news that is happening around the world that sometimes we tend to forget the people who are standing right next to us. It's really easy to forget about them, and the reason why that is because the news is easy, but our neighbors, they're hard. Neighbors are hard. This is an area where it's so easy and we're so tempted to forget the Lord and to rely on our own wisdom. Dealing with other people, now that is the epicenter of real life. When we talk about real life, that's what we're talking about. The very center of real life is our having to deal with other people. Solomon gives us some specific instructions regarding your neighbor in verses 27 to 31. Look what he says here. He says, withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I will give, when thou hast it by thee. Devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing he dwelleth securely by thee. Strive not with a man without a cause, if he done thee no harm. Envy not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. So what does it say here? He gives us some specific instructions. Verses 27 to 31, some specific instructions. Number one, withhold not good. Don't withhold good from your neighbor. Number two is devise not evil. And number three is envy not the oppressor. These are very good instructions with regards to how you deal with other people. You see, this is the way of the oppressor. What he does, first of all, is he withholds good from people when he's able to give it. And also, he devises evil against others when they don't deserve it. This is the way of the oppressor. He withholds good from people when he's able to do it, and he devises evil against them when they don't deserve it. This is what you might call the Machiavellian way. This is the way of the oppressor. And why does he do this? Why does the oppressor have to do this? Why is it that whenever we see someone happy, we have to put an end to it? Why do we devise evil against someone else? Why, whenever someone needs help, do we just hold back and we withhold good from somebody? Why do we do that? Why does the oppressor choose to do that? It's because his number one concern, he's trying to ensure his own security. That's his number one concern. He's trying to ensure his own security in his life. If you compare verse 29, look at verse 29 in this passage that we just saw again. When he says about the oppressor, he says, devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing that he dwelleth what? He dwelleth securely by thee. That's why he's devising evil against him, is because his neighbor has security and he wants it for himself. You see, he ensures his own security by taking it from someone else. This is the wisdom of this world. But that's not where our security comes from. And so that frees us up to be able to help people, and we can, by contrast, we can actually devise to do good to others and maybe even give some of what we have. We don't have to harm others, or even simply, a lot of times we think, well, I'm not harming anybody, but maybe we simply just withhold good. We don't have to withhold good in order to ensure our own security. You see, this instruction, it really links the entire chapter together. You don't have to change the screens, but if you look in your Bibles, remember verse number 3. Look back up at verse number 3. He says, don't let mercy and truth be forsaken, right? Do not forsake mercy and truth. And what is the benefit? For you will find favor and good understanding with both God and man. You see, if we hold on to his mercy and his truth, we'll find favor with both God and man. That's kind of an outline, if you will, for the entire chapter. The first part of this chapter was all about you finding favor with God, right? And the second part is about how you find favor with man. But only, he says, if you will not forsake his mercy and his truth. That's what's required. You cannot forsake his truth, and you will find favor with God. If you do not forsake his mercy, then you'll find favor with man. That's really what links the whole chapter together. See, when God's wisdom is mastered, it becomes a source of your security, and that will change the whole way that you interact with other people. If you can imagine, if you were not relying upon yourself or anyone else for your security, then it would change the way you interact with other people. Now, let me just qualify this. This does not mean, as some people like to think it does, this does not mean that you can just give all of your stuff away. We tend to run to the extremes, don't we? I'm going to hoard everything I have, and I'm going to take some of what you've got so that I can have my position secured over here. And we say, no, that's not the Christian way. So then we want to just give everything away. But both of those are foolish. Both of those are foolish. And the Bible does not support either one of those. In fact, in Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 18, it says this. It says, a man who is void of understanding striketh hands and becometh surety in the presence of his friend. Now, we don't have time to analyze that proverb, but basically what he's saying if your friend comes up and says, hey, can you co-sign this loan for me? You say, no. That's what he's saying. He's saying that's really foolish. Your friend comes up and says, hey, can you insure the funds of this loan for me? You're like, I can't do that. That's a foolish thing to do, is what he's saying. Now, the real point here is that it pertains to what we're studying. He's saying you have to be smart with your money. As he goes on to say in Proverbs 14:15, he says, the simple, they believe every word, but the prudent man looketh well into his going. The gullible, the simple, they're the ones they believe, oh, hey, this is a great deal. You know, if you just give me a little bit here, then I promise I'll pay it back. And we're just like, oh, great, man. Of course, we just believe every word. That doesn't make us wise. The Bible says that makes you simple. That makes you foolish. The prudent man looks very well into his going. My only point here is that being merciful to others is not the same thing as being gullible. That's not the same thing. Being merciful is not the same thing as being gullible or simple. What it means is this. It means when you are wise, then it places you in a secure position so that you don't have to oppress anyone else to secure yourself. That's what it means. When you're wise, then that wisdom will put you in a secure position so that you do not have to oppress anyone else to secure yourself. And the contrast to this wisdom is also implied in this statement. Because see, if sound wisdom, and stick with me here, if sound wisdom, if it puts you into a secure position that you don't have to oppress anyone, what that automatically means by contrast is that you also will not be a burden to anyone. You not only do you not have to oppress, but you won't have to be a burden. You'll not have to oppress your neighbor, and you won't have to burden your neighbor. Because through wisdom, you've put yourself into a secure position. You see, both of those, the oppressor and the one that is the burden, both of those people, check this out, both of them have to take from their neighbor in order to secure their position, don't they? Both of them do. He says here, I want you to hold on to God's words. I want you to hide his wisdom in your heart and apply it, and it will provide you with safety and security so that you can sleep in peace, and you'll not always have to be worried about that tragedy around the corner. Now, Solomon closes out the chapter, as he typically does, with a warning. Closes out with a wise warning in verses 32 to 35. Look what it says here. For the froward is abomination to the Lord, but his secret is with the righteous. The curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, but he blesseth the habitation of the just. Surely he scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. Now, what does that say? It says, first of all, that the froward, that is the perverse, and the house of the wicked. There's several names he uses here. The froward, the perverse, the house of the wicked, the scorner, and the fool. Those are the ones that he mentions. He says about these men, he says they are an abomination. He says also that they are cursed. And he says that they will be mocked by the Lord and they will be awarded with shame. That's the warning. The froward, the house of the wicked, the scorner, and the fool. They are an abomination. They are cursed. They will be mocked by the Lord and they will be awarded with shame. But contrary, he says the righteous, the just, the lowly, and the wise. Those are the ones he mentions by contrast. The righteous, the just, the lowly, and the wise, they will be blessed. They will receive grace and they will inherit glory. There is a word in this passage that I really want you to see. And it's a word that is so absolutely intriguing. It's used only in a few places in this context, mostly in the wisdom books. And it's the word secret. Do you see that? In verse 32, he says, for the froward is an abomination to the Lord, but his secret is with the righteous. This is such a wonderful word here, secret. The word could be thought of as being synonymous with his wisdom. But it's actually, the word is much bigger than that. It really involves almost everything that Solomon has mentioned about wisdom thus far, and even still more to come. We see this word used in some of the other wisdom books. I want to show you just a few passages in Job. In Job, look at this. In Job 15, verses 7 to 8, look what it says here. As they're talking to Job, and they said, are you the first man that was born? Or were you made before the hills? Hast thou, they asked him, have you heard the secret of God? That's the question they asked him. In other words, because they're kind of mocking Job here, they're speaking to him really harshly. And they said, who died and made you God, Job? What makes you think you're smarter than everybody? And in that context, they asked him this question, have you heard the secret of God? In Job chapter 11, verse 6, it says, and that he would show thee the secrets of wisdom, that they are double to that which is. That's his request. He says, I wish that he would show you the secrets of wisdom, and to show you that the secret is double to that which is. In Job 29, verses 1 to 4, look what it says Job continues his parable. And Job is thinking back as Job sits there covered in boils. His children are gone. His wealth is gone. And the only thing he had left was the one thing he wished he would have lost. That's his wife. And he's just sitting there in this misery. And he starts thinking back to the old times. And he says, oh man, oh that I were as I were in months past. In the days, listen how he describes these days when God preserved me, when his candle shined upon my head, when in his light I walked through darkness, as I was in the days of my youth, when the secret of God was upon my tabernacle. This secret that he's talking about, the word itself means wise counsel. That's the idea of the word. But it's more than that. It's more than just wise counsel. Now, check this out. It's almost like a word picture, if you will. The idea of this word secret, it's such an important word that they use here because it's like this. It's like whenever you have a counselor or an advisor and they're giving you some counsel that is so important, but they just whisper it in your ear. That's the idea of the word. It's wise counsel, but it's wise counsel that is just whispered in your ear. Why? Because it's a secret. That's exactly why they call it this. It is talking about his wise counsel that God gives, but it's wise counsel that is whispered. You see, when you come into that intimate relationship with him in the fear of the Lord, what he does is, this is what God does. When you get close to him, he whispers in your ear. That's what Job is talking about. I wish that I lived in the days of my youth when God would whisper in my ear his secret wisdom. That's what his friends were mocking him and asking him, did someone tell you the secret of God? That's what they're referring to. Did God whisper into your ear some secret wisdom that we don't know about? And I wish that he said, I wish you could understand the secret of God, that it's double to any other wisdom that you might think that there is. The secret of God is whenever you get so close to him that he whispers in your ear his secret. See, Proverbs as a whole is all about you learning how to live life skillfully. But the secret of God lies with him. It lies with him. My question to you today is, will you draw close to him? That's the only way that you get the secret. Will you draw close to him? As it pertains to this chapter, will you fear him and draw close to him? Will you dig into his word, hide his word in your heart, keep his word in your heart, write his word on your heart, hang it about your neck. Do not let truth and mercy forsake you, but trust in him with all of your heart so that he directs your paths. Not to lean on your own understanding, not to be wise in your own eyes, but trust in him with all of your heart and fear the Lord so that you come close to him, so close to him. If you do you know what he will do? This is the promise, is he says that God he'll whisper in your ear his secret. That's what this is talking about. He will whisper into your ear his secret. So the question is obvious. What's the secret? Tell us what the secret is. But I can't. You see, the answer to that question is reserved only for those who are close enough to hear his whisper. That's the reason the scriptures doesn't talk about it too much. And it doesn't tell you outright what it is. That answer to his secret We can talk about how it's his wisdom, it is. We can talk about how it's his secret to life, it is. We can talk about how it's his blessing that he gives upon your life, and it is. It's all of that. But what does he say? What does he actually say when you get that close to him? And he whispers his secret in your ear. That is reserved only for those who are close enough to him to hear him whisper in their ear. The question is, will you get that close to him? Will you be willing to dispense with your own wisdom long enough to fear him and draw close to him? And will you be able to do that in the midst of real life? When it gets real in the areas of your money, when it gets real in the areas of hard lessons, when it gets real in the areas of other people and having to deal with other people, will you dispense with your own wisdom? Will you stay true to his wisdom, wrap it around your neck and hold on to it and trust in him with all of your heart, and in the fear of the Lord draw close to him? So in all of these situations, you have him whispering in your ear. He says, that's what will bring security to your situation. That's what really brings happiness, is having him in your ear so that he dispenses his secret. He whispers his secret to you. What about you? Will you draw close enough to him? Do you want to know what he would say? I do. I want to know what he would say. I want to know what the secret of God is. But you have to be close enough to hear him whisper.